When I was a kid in school, I can remember repeated report cards that gave me all good grades, all E's or A's as we got older, but always a note at the bottom that says, Sarah talks too much, Sarah goes too fast. Sarah needs to slow down and stop being so social and focus more on, she's being a disruption to the classroom, basically. And then as my brother got into school and started advancing through, same thing. Excellent grades, but being called out for his fidgeting and noise making and can't sit still. Later on, we realized that both of us just had really fast moving brains and we were bored. And even though we were enjoying school very much, we weren't very much challenged. And so we got bored, and so we got not necessarily into trouble, but just got really irritating. I became a mom when I was barely 20 years old, and for the first little while, things were really busy. Life was really chaotic, and I didn't even have time to think about anything else except for mothering. Then we decided to homeschool, and so for several years, I was just trying to get myself into a good routine. But about 12, 13 years ago, I started to realize I've got this routine down pretty good, and things are moving really smoothly, and I'm starting to wonder, is there anything else out there to do? And so I started on a path of self-education, just researching things that were interesting to me, going on little tangents, going on little trips, and just sort of feeding this brain that tended to get really irritating when it was bored. Since graduating high school 28 years ago, I have attended universities and community colleges. But it's in the seasons when I have taken time for self-education and putting together a plan for myself of study, of research, of just digging in and focusing on subjects that were interesting to me. It's in those times that I have felt the most fulfilled. I think that I have learned quite a bit more as a self-educated student than I ever did as a university or college student. This past month of May, I just focused on mood reading. I didn't pursue any particular area of interest and study. I didn't read anything heavy at all. I barely took notes. There was only one super long Goodreads response for the entire month, and that in itself was a rant and probably not worth reading. And I'm finding myself here at the end of the month with a really bored brain. Now, that month of mood reading was probably really good for my spirit, especially since most of what I read was positive and just happy, just a simple, happy, joyful set of stories. But I'm finding that I'm feeling the urge to dig into something deep and highlight a bunch of stuff. My brain is getting a little bored, and therefore I am getting irritating. So out of mercy for myself and family, I have decided to put together a set of courses that I designed for myself for a self-educated summer school. So if I enjoy this little plan that I've put together here that I'll tell you about in a minute, then I may even do something in the fall and start, fall courses and get to the point where I am just putting myself through kind of a DIY, humanities degree maybe. But we'll start with summer and see how I do. I've been thinking about this for a little bit, and so the other day I pulled out this cute summary notebook and figured this will be the notebook in which I record all of my written responses and keep track of my plan and all that good stuff. So I wanted to share with you guys what I came up with for my 3-month summer school, June, July, and August 2025. I have several subjects I'm going to study. They are math, health, anthropology/archaeology, science/nature, art/creative pursuits. And then I have several subheadings under literature. I've got biography, memoir, translated work, high school nightmares, we'll get back to that in a minute, poetry, and then I've got history and historical fiction. So let me share with you guys the plan for the summer. I've got 13 books and 2 magazines. And so obviously I'm going to be reading quite a bit more than just this for the summer, but I also have a plan for responses and projects with some of these. So I do think it's going to take up a good part of my summer. Normally I read 10, 11-ish, maybe 12 books in a month. So even though there are 13 books here, all of the extra that I have to go with them will take me longer than just 1 month. All right, so we'll start with math. Now, I don't want to actually do math because I'm not at all a mathy person. Maybe one of these terms I will, but not yet. So I'm going to actually read about math instead. So this book is called Galileo and the Magic Numbers, and it is by Sydney Rosen. This book was originally published in 1958, and so obviously this is a reprint, but I found it on Amazon. And it's a book that is on a suggested reading list for my kids' homeschool curriculum. So I thought that I would pick it up. It is about science and numbers. It's basically Galileo's biography. So that will be my math reading. So I'm going to read it and write up a response. For the subject of health, I'm going to read this book by a friend of mine, Anne Elliott. The book is called Too Tired. A lot of it is about adrenal fatigue, but it says a comprehensive look at fatigue in women and what to do about it. It's very sciencey. I've had this book for a little while, but I have not yet read through it. But my friend Anne is a very smart woman, and I am really looking forward to seeing what she's put together in this book for women. And she puts out a lot of written material. So I'm going to go through this book. I think that there may be, if not projects, maybe just kind of prompts, to self-evaluate, possibly, but definitely a book that I think is going to be very helpful to me in this time of my life, for sure. All right, and the next subject is anthropology/archaeology. Now, if I were to go back to school now, I would probably pursue a degree in cultural anthropology. The study of people and their cultures and all that stuff has always interested me. I've always been interested in archaeology, in linguistics. Just that whole realm of anthropology is really my thing. And that is something that I just naturally study on my own to a pretty good degree, but I'm going to do something pretty fun with it. This is A Mudlarking Year by Laura Mike-Klim. This is a book that I bought a while back when it first came out. Every time I show you guys this book, I do this because look at see how the water shines on the book cover? I just think that's so pretty. But this is a book about her adventures in mudlarking. This is her second book, as far as I know, about mudlarking. And mudlarking, if you're not aware, is a special hobby known to London when you go out, when the tide is out and you search the, exposed area, the exposed mud for stuff. And when you do this on the Thames, you can find things from all eras of history jumbled together in the same place. And that is what Laura Mike-Klim does and writes about. She has an Instagram that is really fantastic. A lot of times she will show an object that she found and people will identify it on her Instagram, and she probably learns just as much from her followers as they learn from her. I read her first book called Mudlark several years ago and just loved it, and so I was so excited to get this. So I'm going to read through this book for the purposes of studying anthropology, archaeology, etc. And then instead of kind of a traditional written response essay like I'm going to do with some of the others, instead I'm going to put together a little booklet that is sort of written and art, maybe like a little, artistic journal. Because my project for this class is to go on at least one mudlarking venture myself. Now, I live in Northwest Arkansas. The only probably ancient cool things that I'm gonna find in the water are Indian artifacts, right? But I do know of one place that quite a few years ago, I went out, my family had gone out to the edge of a lake, and it was the site of a hotel resort that had been torn down. And in the water, I found a piece of pottery, and it was just a shard from maybe a teacup or a plate, because it had a pretty pink flower on it with a green stem and leaves. And it was just a little piece, just, maybe an inch square-ish. And I didn't keep it. I tossed it back in the water, but of course now I wish I would have held on to it. And so I just thought, maybe this piece of pottery came from the dining room in this resort hotel. It was kind of Edwardian-ish. And so who knows? but that's at least one spot that I know has enough kind of like ruins around it that it's possible I might be able to find something in the mud out there. Otherwise, what I find is probably going to be modern, but still fun, right? So I've got to go on a mudlarking adventure and then put together a little booklet with drawings of what I found on my adventure and talk a little bit about it, and then also incorporate some of the information from Laura Meiklum's book. Really looking forward to that. Next is Science and Nature. I have 2 books for this class. The first one is Rooted. This is by Leanda Lynn Haupt. And I think I heard a little bit about this on BookTube, but more about some of her other books. But I was in Barnes & Noble the other day. I have a couple of gift cards, and so this is one of the books that I picked up. Just kind of sifting through it a little bit. I don't know that her philosophy on life and like the way she sees the world is going to jive too much with mine. But if I can take her words and sort of put them into my own like life perspective, I think that I'm going to get some poetic and interesting, beautiful things out of this book. The subtitle is Life at the Crossroads of Science, Nature, and Spirit. So it's a book about her experiences in nature, or just like humanity's experiences in nature. It's got some drawings that are kind of cool. So I think this will be a good book to respond to, just because, like I said, philosophies and worldviews are probably different, but love for nature and what we get out of nature, I think, can be similar, as well as she'll probably really inspire me when it comes to spending time in nature. So that is one that I'm going to go through. And then the second one, this is a book that I read for a college class a long time ago, a Sand County Almanac by Aldo Leopold. And same thing, this guy is writing about his experiences in nature. This book was published in 1949, so I've got, whatever that is, 75 years difference between these two writers. But the interesting thing about creation is probably hasn't changed that much in 75 years. So it'll be interesting to sort of compare these two people's, a woman and then a man, living probably in different parts of the nation. I'm not sure, writing from different eras, just kind of getting their perspectives on life and nature. So I'm going to read both of those and write a response. And then I'm also going to keep a 30-day observation journal of my own. So it doesn't have to be 30 consecutive days, just within the 3 months, I want 30 days at least worth of entries, maybe some sketches. I'm not a great sketcher, but it's just for myself, so it's fine. And just kind of do some observation of my own. All right, and then we come into the literature portion. So biography and memoir is the first one, and this is Jane Austen's Bookshelf by Rebecca Romney. I've been wanting to read this. I just got this, I don't know, maybe within this month, maybe April I got it, and haven't got to dip into it yet, but I'm going to do it in the next couple of weeks, because this book is kind of this one woman's research on different authors that inspired Jane Austen. And so the different ways that she found that out, I'm assuming, are Jane's own writings about other authors, a record of what Jane read herself, but also allusions within her own writing to other authors or other authors' work. Maybe there's some information in letters, that kind of stuff. So I'm interested to go through this. I want to get a list of names and look for those books while I'm in England, or even here at home when I get back. I have found that a lot of the classics that I want to read, not necessarily obscure things, but just not as popular. Like, for instance, Mary Shelley's The Last Man is not necessarily an obscure piece by her, but it is something that's not as readily available as Frankenstein is, right? It's hard to find here. And then when I go online and look for them, it's like, $25 or something. I have found that a lot of those are in the shops, just right there at Waterstones, kind of their equivalent of Barnes & Noble, just way better. And so I'm going to put together this list of authors that I can look for while I'm at Waterstones or otherwise, and bring home some stuff. So I want to get this one done here really soon. So that will be part of my project response to this book, and then also just some kind of written, essay or whatever. Some of these authors I do already have on my shelf, like Mariah Edgeworth and Fanny Burney, Elizabeth Inchbald. I have not yet read, but Jess purchased a couple of her books, Anne Radcliffe. It looks like, as I'm kind of flipping through these chapters, there's only one or maybe two that I have not yet read, authors that I have not yet read or have not even heard of. I think there's only one here I've not heard of, but there's a very extensive bibliography. There is a very extensive appendix with all kinds of other authors here. So I'm interested if this is going to be a really great resource because of all of the different authors and works that it mentions. I'm really excited about that book. I've never done something like this where I've done several different subjects at the same time. Usually I just pick a specific line of study and then I just sort of, get in it, and everything I can find on that subject I try to immerse myself into. In this case, for these next 3 months, I am dipping into several different subjects, time periods, parts of the world, etc. But it's very possible that a specific line of study might come out of this, and that's why I'm leaving future, self-educated terms like fall term or winter term. I'm leaving those up in the air because I don't want to set myself up to make a goal and then have to quit it, right? If I decide, actually, I really just want to study Georgian and Regency era authors instead. So we'll just kind of leave it loose for now and then see. Okay, and then the next kind of subheading of literature is translated work. And for that, I'm going to read this translation of the Metamorphoses by Franz Kafka, and the translator is Susan Bernofsky. Now, I read this in high school. It's just one of those things that my teacher just sort of photocopied a portion and handed it out. I think we didn't even get very far into it, just the first few pages of, he finds out he's a bug and then what, his own thoughts, and then kind of left it. I think it was supposed to sort of whet our appetite to read the rest of the book, but for me anyway, I was just like, what? No, this is weird. I just, I wasn't in that mindset of like, wow, that's trippy. I wonder what happens. I just like, ew, this is weird. But anyway, basically the Metamorphosis is the story of this guy, Gregor, and he wakes up one day and he has turned into an insect. And throughout the story, he's in his room and he stays in his room as this big bug. And the story is all about how the people who love him respond to that, how they deal, how it affects their lives, etc. It's a super weird story, but it's Kafka, and it's a super short story. Now, I am pretty sure that this is a new translation. It says 2014. Now, that's long after I was out of high school, right? So I'm not sure what translation I read in high school, but a couple of years ago, I listened on audiobook to a translation of the story. And of course, I don't remember who translated it, and I can't find it now, but when I read the first page of this, it doesn't sound right. It starts off, when Gregor Samsa woke one morning from troubled dreams, he found himself transformed right there in his bed into some sort of monstrous insect. He was lying on his back, which was hard like a carapace, and when he raised his head a little, he saw his curved brown belly segmented by rigid arches atop which the blanket, already slipping, was just barely managing to cling. His many legs, pitifully thin compared to the rest of him, waved helplessly before his eyes. What in the world has happened to me, he thought. It was no dream. And I don't know, for some reason, it just doesn't sound right to me. Now, I know this wasn't the version that I read in high school. The front of this says a new translation, and it was published in 2014. It could have been the one I listened to within the last year or two. But in my head, I have this sort of picture remembrance of what the story is and how it goes and certain parts and whatever. So what I'm planning to do is, before I even start this translation, I want to write out everything that I remember, just certain parts that stuck out to me. I just want to brain dump everything I can remember about this story by Kafka. And then I want to write out why I am so hesitant to read another translation, because that seems to be the thing with me, because I was actually listening to someone else talk about this recently, about how once she reads a work in a certain translation, she doesn't want to read another translation because she'll get into it and then realize, no, this isn't right. This isn't the story. She'll go back to her original read, right? The original translated work. Just because that's the one, that's the story to her in her eyes. And that's kind of how I felt when I bought this and then realized, oh, this is a new translation. This probably isn't what I listened to or what I read. And it's been sitting on my shelf for a year and a half because I haven't wanted to read something different. So putting it on my little school thing for this summer. And after I get all of my initial, preliminary thoughts out on paper, I'm going to go ahead and read it. And then I will respond both to myself prior to reading it, as well as to the work itself. I think that'll be kind of fun. If it is a different translation than what I listened to a little while ago, this I think will be the first time that I have read something in 2 different translations. And that could be a fun study in the future with other works. But then again, I am probably more apt to say, no, this isn't right. All right, the next subject is called High School Nightmares. Now, this section was kind of inspired by Nicole at Noteworthy Fiction. She tagged me in a tag that I need to get done and put up, but it had something to do with the things that we read in high school. And when I think back on high school and the things that I read, I don't remember a whole lot. And I don't actually think that I was assigned a lot of full-on books. I do remember being assigned full books in middle school, but once I got to high school, I just remember my English teacher just photocopying a ton of stuff, and then we would just read portions and we would respond to that. Now, I was in mostly advanced placement English and literature classes in high school, and I think maybe the reason that she did this is because she wanted to expose us to a lot of different stuff, but neither her budget nor ours would accommodate tons and tons of different books. And so I think I just got little tastes of things out there. And that's why when I see a title like, A Movable Feast by Ernest Hemingway, or what is that one by Kate Chopin? I can't remember, but I'll see little titles. I'll be like, oh, I've read that. And then, no, maybe I haven't read that because I just got little snippets. Anyway, when I look back at that time, the books that I can remember there are 2 specific books that I know we read in high school because for some reason, I don't know if like the public schools of the 90s had some kind of contract with the publishers of these 2 books, but I feel like every English teacher wanted us to read these, and I despised them. Did I despise them because we were constantly being forced to read them, or are they just not good books? So those books are Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck and A Separate Piece by John Knowles. Now, my favorite literature teacher, I don't remember ever assigning these books to us, so maybe that's why she was my favorite. But I know I can remember 3 specific teachers at least who assigned Of Mice and Men. And I know that I had to read A Separate Piece both in middle school and high school. Now, I also understand that this was in the day, at least in my part of the nation, where there wasn't really a set curriculum, like you got to read these books in these years. I don't know if that's a thing now, like right after I graduated is when they started implementing like whatever that's called, right? That they were trying to do the new millennium way of Common Core, is what I'm thinking of. And I've homeschooled ever since then, so I have no idea actually what they do now. But I just know that in those days, the teachers came up with their own stuff, right? They made their own plan, they did their own stuff, and for some reason, they all wanted to read Of Mice and Men. Maybe it's because it's short. I don't know, but Steinbeck has other short books. Like, come on, guys, communicate. Before reading the backs of these books in the store, when I begrudgingly offered the rest of my gift card money to buy them, I did not remember what these stories were about. I have read the back of Mice and Men 2 or 3 times since purchasing this book just last week, and I still can't remember what this book is about. All I know is it's about 2 guys and there's a tragedy, and the cover looks Oklahoma-ish. Okay, so that's where I'm at with that, and I so much do not want to read this book. A separate piece, when I read the back of it, I don't know, it sounds kind of like dark academia. It sounds like it is about some guys at a boarding school. And again, I remember there were two main guys. And maybe that's why these two books stick in my memory, because they're both about two main guys and there's some kind of tragedy. I can't remember. But a separate piece is about boys at a boarding school. But I lived in Eastern Oregon, in a farm town. And so we were the furthest removed from, 1950s-ish, 40s, 50s-ish, boarding school in New York during the time of World War II. Maybe it's because these books were completely unrelatable. I have no idea. But anyway, what I'm going to do for this is, before I start reading these, I'm going to write out my response. A lot of the things I just told you, and I'm going to write all that out, and then I'm going to read them, and then I'm going to respond. And I'm also going to maybe write a critique of why these books are applicable to the kids of the 90s, and would they be applicable to kids of 2025? I also would like to do a little research and find out if anybody is still teaching these books, because no matter how great they are, we're on the third generation now, fourth generation. We're coming into the fourth generation of kids, since my mom's era anyway. Surely there's something else out there that can be taught to kids. All right, and then the next subheading for literature is poetry, which is another subject that I've not always enjoyed, but I am going to really try and give it a shot, because I think what I didn't like about poetry when I was in high school was the analyzing of it. I love to look for symbolism and meaning and, metaphors and all that kind of stuff. I love to pick apart writing and look for that stuff. But analyzing the terms, the poetic terms like iambic pentameter and stanzas and the vocabulary that goes with poetry, that really bothered me. It made it too mathy. It just took away from the poeticness of poetry, I thought, to study that out and pick the words apart. And you know what I'm trying to say? I don't know if I'm not expressing this super well, but I think that once we had to kind of analyze the words and the poem structure itself, it was just like stripping all of the creativity away from it. And when I look back on it, there is actually a lot of creativity involved in constructing a poem, right? I get that. But at the time, I didn't see that. All I saw was, why are we picking this thing apart? Can't we just talk about its symbolism? So I am going to read through this collection, at least portions of it, of the works by Keats. And I decided on Keats because he wrote a poem called To Autumn. He wrote it in Winchester, about Winchester, and his experience there. There is a portion of town that is called the Keats Walk, and takes you along the river and out to the old place where it's called the Hospital of St. Cross, but it's basically on the Pilgrim Trail when people would take pilgrimages, like Canterbury Tales, that whole deal. And so it is one of the books that I plan on taking on my trip next month and reading from while I'm there in Winchester. So I'm going to read a few selections from this book by Keats and deconstruct them content-wise and completely ignore iambic pentameter. And then also a few from my book of Emily Bronte's poems. I've been very slowly reading through this book since my husband bought it for me about 1.5 years ago. And so I want to read a few more and write about them. So I've got to write about at least 3 of hers and at least 3 of his. In this little book, it is both his poetry and prose. Poems and letters, it says, of Keats. So I've got to read and respond to at least 3 pieces of writing by Keats, and maybe even write up a little bit of biography. I'm not sure. In the last couple of weeks, I've read a lot of biographical stuff on him, so we'll see if I feel like writing up something as well. The category that I have kind of the least amount of stuff on here is history, because it really is what I mostly read. I mainly read nonfiction historical things and sometimes historical fiction, but mostly nonfiction stuff. And it's just what I kind of normally study and respond to already. And so I don't want to put a lot on there just because I know I'm going to just be naturally doing that. So I put one really small book that I picked up last year in Winchester, and this is The Medieval Housewife by Toni Mount. It's just a real short, you can see it's very thin, book about medieval women and just how they lived, what they wore, what they ate, how they did their daily stuff, what their interests and pursuits were. I don't know, all kinds of different stuff about medieval women. Obviously, it's only going to just touch on some things because it is only like 85 pages in the whole thing. But I think that it's going to be really interesting. And so I'm going to read through this, and then my response is to write something, like an essay or something similar, but then also do like 3 prompts or projects from the book. So maybe there'll be a recipe in there, I will make the recipe, or maybe there's some kind of a little hand sewn project or something. If not, then I've got to look for some on Pinterest or whatever and make 3 medieval women projects or recipes to pretend that I am a medieval housewife. When I do go over to Winchester and I do my vlog, I will show you guys some of the neat medieval places there, because there is quite a bit of stuff. And so when I look at these pictures, a lot of them look like places or museum sort of exhibits that I have seen when I've gone over to Winchester. And then of course we have the beautifully colored images here and illuminated writing, and all of that stuff can be found at the cathedral. So you guys will see a lot of that when I do my vlogs next month. And then my historical fiction read is going to be Haven by Emma Donoghue. This book was recommended to me by Melinda at A Web of Stories when I was reading another book on the same subject called Sun Dancing by Geoffrey Morehouse a few months ago. It talks about the place off the coast of Ireland called Skellig Michael. It's kind of like islands, but they're super rocky, and there was monastery there for quite a long time. If you guys have seen, I think it's The Last Jedi, if you've seen that Star Wars episode, pretty sure that's the one, and they are actually on that island, and you can see like the little huts and things that the monks lived in. It's a pretty cool place to read about and learn about. So there's this book called Sun Dancing that I've read a couple of times over the years, and it shares the history of that place as well as a historical fiction story set in the place, kind of both in the same volume. This is a story written by Emma Donoghue that approaches the same topic about a group of monks that are living on Skellig Michael, and kind of explores the topic of isolation and how we can act when we are isolated. And I think it's gonna be really good. I read another book by her in the past that was it was about the fasting girls, and that was a topic that I was fascinated with for a long time, was the phenomenon of the Victorian fasting girls. And so anyway, she wrote a book on that called, maybe it's called The Wonder, something like that. So I'm looking forward to reading that and then writing a response that incorporates the information from the book Sun Dancing as well as this, to kind of, just write out something in response. And then finally, I am going to do a arts and creative pursuits class. And for that, I am actually going to go through both of these magazines. So I love to collect art magazines, like creative papercraft sort of magazines. I love Daphne's Diary and I love Somerset Studio. I picked these up at Barnes & Noble. They're like the same price as a whole book usually. So my goal for this class will be to go through these books, read the articles, look at the different projects, and then I need to pick out at least 6 projects to do, or prompts. Daphne's Diary has more than just art projects. It also has like recipes, and it has just like fun little games. Like for instance, this page here, it also has a little flap of stickers included. Like, this is so fun, right? This is people watching, and so they have these little sketched out people. And one guy Looks like he's walking with maybe a camera. Another person has a rolling suitcase, and another person is just walking with their hands behind their back. Another one's holding a child. And basically these people are doing something, right? They're on the move. And so on this page, we are supposed to sort of write about them. And there's these little biography boxes here. And so you write in their name, their age, their job, where they live, and what activity they are currently engaged in. And it's kind of like a writing prompt, right? Because then if I want to, I can take that information from, camera wielding man and write out a whole short story regarding what the guy is doing today. And so just those kinds of things, I need to do 6 of those kinds of things. But there's also, I really love Daphne's diary because there's also usually like a place featured, right? Somewhere around the world, and it has just featuring, I think this is Luxembourg maybe. Oh, yep, sure is Luxembourg. So it's just an article about Luxembourg. It shows lots of photos and gives some history and stuff. So just kind of read through everything and then do 6 projects. Here are some like things you can cut out and use for art. So you could like frame those and hang them up somewhere if that is your artistic taste. But on the back of them, it almost kind of looks like they're postcards. Like, I don't think I could send these within the US without putting them in an envelope, but you could use it as a piece of stationery and write a letter to somebody. And anyway, I think it's gonna be really fun. And I have so many of these art magazines. Like, you can kind of see here on this shelf. There you go, kind of. I've got quite a few there, and all of those are unread. All of those are like unworked. So I really want to go through those. Like, I bought them for a reason, right? And I was inspired. So that will be my little art section and art projects. I'm really excited about this. Nothing is super academic. It's all kind of lighthearted and fun, just dipping my toes into different subjects, different parts of history, different parts of the world, and just kind of getting an overall, taste of stuff, sort of a general ed, sort of a summer. And then we'll see at the end of the summer, do I want to continue on in this kind of focused, structured study plan? If so, do I want another eclectic mix of subjects and, material? Or do I want to focus on one certain thing and just sort of go from there? Either way will be fun, so we'll just see what I'm sort of in the mood for. But ultimately, I know that I am in an era and coming even more into an era of my life where things are slowing down and calming down. Myself, I don't want to slow down, right? I still want to keep traveling, keep exploring, going and doing stuff. I don't want to be home and just settle in this house for the rest of my life. I want to get out there in the world and see a lot of stuff. But my time is really opening up. My schedule is opening up more and more. I've only got 5 years left of homeschooling. And so I think I'm just kind of naturally transitioning into the things that I have wanted to pursue over my life and just have not had enough focused time to do so. So I'm kind of setting the stage for that in these next few years of my life. Like I said, I've still got a few years where my focus needs to be here and on my kids ultimately, but those years are coming to a close. And I don't want to just be left wondering, what do I do now, right? I want to be able to just seamlessly transition into, well, hey, now it's time to continue pursuing the things that interest me at an even deeper level, right, than I've been able to. So I think that's kind of what this stuff is about, and keeping my brain from getting bored. When we get bored, we get into trouble. We get obnoxious and we irritate people, and I don't want to be that person. So anyway, I hope this inspired you. If you guys are thinking about doing anything like this, or you have in the past, let me know kind of your experiences with that in the comments section. I would love to chat about this with you. Hope you guys are having a really great day, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye.